Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled HOA Bullies vandalized my mailbox and bashed it to pieces for refusing to buy a $500 mailbox. I live in an HOA neighborhood. I've never really had a problem with the HOA management. I am retired, so what else am I going to do besides upgrade my house and keep it maintained? The only difference is that I just made sure it was aligned with the HOA standards. Last year I had decided to upgrade my mailbox. The design was one approved by the HOA beforehand, except I got the upgraded version. I'm not sure how much of an upgrade it really was, considering it was only $40, but it did its job and that was good enough for me. After all, does it really matter what your mailbox looks like? It was only supposed to hold mail. Well, apparently it did matter. Just 2 months after I got the mailbox, the HOA board members voted on a new mailbox that was white and had a W on it. The W was supposed to stand for the golf course that we lived by, as we were considered a golfing community. I thought that this was absolutely ridiculous, especially since the new design cost $500. We lived in pretty nice communities, most of us were well above middle class. However, who in their right mind would spend $500 on a mailbox? It turns out that I was not the only one who did not like this, as many residents began to complain to the HOA. So many people were complaining, in fact, that the HOA decided to have a meeting about it. My neighbors had said she had also just replaced her mailbox with a new $100 one because her old one was starting to crack in the wood. She was upset that she would have to spend another $500 or keep paying fees for her new mailbox not being up to standards. Well, the meeting did not go too well. I don't like to speak with profanity, but one of the board members was an absolute ass. I had spoken up about the fact that this new design was $500, which was absolutely absurd for a mailbox. If this was something that had to do with the houses themselves, such as painting or roofing, I might be able to understand. But $500 for a mailbox was just not plausible, even for those of us in retirement. The response I got from one particular board member was, "Most of you have retirement money, what's the problem?" The problem is that most people have more important things that $500 could go to. Not only was this statement extremely rude, but the board member was being ageist. When confronted with another complaint by another resident, the HOA president himself responded, "There is nothing that we can do about it. We already approved this design." Well, yes, there is something that you can do about it. How about not approve such a ridiculously priced design in the first place? Not only that, but the board members and president have the authority to go back and vote again on a different design. For people that sure love their power, they were not using it very smart. Well, about a week later, I had decided to do some early morning grocery shopping. Keep in mind that both my wife and I are retired, so we don't get out of the house as much as we used to. We enjoyed spending our free time being cozy and comfortable in our home. I left early, around 7 AM in the morning. I returned about an hour later, and I was surprised to find that my mailbox had not only been spray painted, but that it had been completely smashed to the ground and was separated from the post. I had no idea who would do this. I was terribly upset and I did not even know where to begin when it came to figuring out who did this and why they would do it. My wife was home, but she did not hear anything because she was in the shower in the far side of the house. Well, luckily for me, my neighbor across the street did hear something. About an hour or two later, she came knocking on my door, holding her phone up to me. She had one of those security camera systems that you could link to an app on your phone, and one of them was pointed outwards towards her front yard and driveway. You could see my front yard in the shot as well. As she played the footage, I saw someone pull up in a car, only to get out and spray paint black all over my wooden mailbox. After they spray painted it, they had reached into the front seat of their car and pulled out a baseball bat, smashing the mailbox to the ground. Upon further investigation of the video, it looked like it was that one board member who was rude to me during the meeting. My neighbor suggested we take this straight to the police rather than filing a report with the HOA. Bless my neighbor for helping us as well. I'm just an old guy, but I was totally lost on what to do and how I could prove it was this HOA board member. Luckily for me, the police and my neighbor were a great help. I also knew some good lawyers and that ended up helping me out a lot too. Well, the police were able to match the license plate in the video to the board member's car. After months of investigation and trial, he was found guilty on a felony charge. Mailboxes are taken pretty seriously by the government. I should have put more thought into my mailbox. Said board member was found guilty and sentenced to 1 year in prison. He also had to pay a fine of $130,000 for damaging the mailbox. I guess he will never ever vandalize again. Who knew that vandalizing a mailbox could be a federal offense? Oh, and we are not longer an HOA community. After this, there was an investigation launched within the HOA regarding their board members, and the HOA has completely been disbanded. And Ripe Stars, if you enjoy the stories about HOAs and crazy neighbors, then please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support my channel. Thank you so much in advance. The next one is titled Grandma Revenge. This is my grandma's story and I love it. She worked for years under the former communist regime in a very serious position, not usual for a woman at that time. She was the first female rails quality controller in the largest steel mill in the country. Now, most of you may not understand the seriousness of the situation. Under the east side of the Iron Curtain, if someone had a job, especially at a high level, he lived quite well. But if someone has exposed himself to the authorities too much, clearly demonstrated that he/she is mocking the power, you could lose everything in a minute. Be imprisoned without trial, without witnesses, that was a real threat. So, back to the story, my grandma repeatedly tried to explain to her boss, who was clearly not competent to perform his function, that he had to read what he signs. She was constantly given contradictory documents. On the same day, her boss was able to sign a document in which he orders to send 10 tons of rails to another city, and at the same time another document in which he states that they should be postponed for collection the next day. And it was happening all the time. She was going crazy. So Grandma asked and asked. "Don't sign anything until you have read it." And he stubbornly replied, "I know very well what I'm signing, don't bother me." Until the day came when my grandma decided she had enough. She received a letter from the governing authorities. They asked for some document to be sent to them again. And then Grandma wrote back, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have sent you this document a month ago, consignment number X. If your papers are in such a mess that you cannot find a simple document, then I suggest you start kissing our ass instead of giving us a hard time." So she gave it to her boss for signature, who of course signed it. She made a copy but put the original in her pocket and left the stamped copy on his desk, meaning that it had been sent. When he realized what she had done and what the consequences of this letter would be for him, first he chased her through half the steel mill shouting that he was going to kill her. Then he begged and begged, promised her raises, just not to send it. In the end, he fell to his knees, crying and begging for mercy. She walked over to him, she returned the original, and she just asked if he would read what he was signing from now on. He nodded his head, and as she tells the story, he really read everything very carefully from that moment on. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would say that is one of the most important life lessons. You should always read before you sign something, even if it is multiple pages of documents. Some people just have to learn it the hard way. The next one is titled Apartment Revenge. Okay, so back in the mid-90s I was a single guy in my late 20s. I was a man-child, I admit. I was working but just enough to pay rent and go drinking every night. I have since gotten married and kids and a house, yada yada. Anyway, there were these two ladies my age at the bar where I was a regular that just had their roommate move out abruptly. I was looking to move to something cheaper and this place was a unicorn. $350 a month for a 3-bedroom place, close to everything. It was not the greatest place, but far from horrible. That is $350 divided 3 ways. Plus the heat and electrics were paid for by the doctor's office below us. I was paying that alone plus utilities, so hell yeah, I moved in. Day 1 and the ladies have me sign the lease. I knew it was kind of BS right away, as they had a copy of the lease with the old roommate's name whited out on it and had me sign. I was never to contact the landlord myself. Suspicious? Sure, but whatever. Here's $200 for deposit and first month rent. The ladies were a bit quirky, they were lazy as well. Sure, they were fun and all, but they seemed to think that they owned me. They would ask me where I have been, who I was dating, why I did not get in until 6 AM, I worked swing shifts. Lots of little things like being on AOL Instant Messenger, no cells at this point, all night and day, tying up the phone lines, leaving garbage and other crap in the common areas, dirty dishes, etc. I actually did not really care, except that they would have the nerve to scold me for leaving out my shoes or coat or whatever in the midst of their mess. I made a point of never leaving my stuff out, but occasionally I would and they would mention it. Plus, a cousin of the one roommate stayed there 2 to 5 times a week, which again was annoying, but whatever. Rent was cheap and I barely saw them. The best part would be in passive-aggressive notes like, "Hey, please don't leave your shoes out by the couch. I almost tripped on them this morning." However, there was clutter everywhere and they would be complaining about my shoes. They would have weeks worth of dishes everywhere and my shoes were the problem. Okay, whatever. I could write a book about the crazy, but let's move on. It got really bad when I met the person that became my wife. They were a bit jealous and tried regularly to break us up. She called one morning, the ring woke me up, the ladies answered the phone, saying that I never came home last night after meeting some girl at a bar. I called her later and she told me this, laughing the whole time. She knew it was BS since she dropped me off for the night shift the night before. There were a lot of similar stories like this, but on to the main story. The lease was up in a month and they decided to get another apartment and I would have to move out. I asked if I could take over the rent and they said that the landlord already leased it to someone else. Okay, sure. So I finally called the landlord myself. She tells me that she only knew I was living there because she got my check every month. I made them out to cash and the roommates were too lazy to cash the check beforehand. She said that no, she has not leased out the apartment and had not gotten any notice from the ladies that they were moving out yet, but the one cousin that stayed over often was wanting to sign. It was obvious to me that the landlord did not like these women and I asked if I could have first. Furthermore, they were trying to steal the lease from under me and give it to the cousin. I asked and received a letter from her giving me first dibs on the apartment. A couple days later I come home from my shift and there is an opened mail on the table for me from the landlord with the first dibs letter sitting there. Which means they opened my mail along with a bitter 3-page note about how I could do this to them, why did I contact the landlord, I'm a horrible person, etc. I laughed and read it to my now girlfriend and future wife. She laughed along with me. The next few weeks were cold. One-word answers to questions, no mention of the note or moving out. They did give notice and I promptly signed a real lease with only my name on it and paid 3 months upfront just because I could. A few weeks later I came home to find 3 bags of garbage and 2 empty bedrooms. They were gone. I had a 3-bedroom apartment to myself for $350 a month. Oh, the after-hour parties we had. I lived there 2 more years, one as a married man with a kid on the way. We sadly had to get a better place and I had to give up my unicorn apartment, but I will never forget screwing over them before they could do it to me. The next one is titled, Arrogance is a Sin. I have a close family friend who I grew up alongside. We had an intense rivalry when we were kids and he loved to make fun of me. One of his favorite insults was to call me stupid and make me feel super incompetent. I remember a particular gathering when I was in year 7 when I jokingly confessed that I messed up a math test. He then spent the rest of the evening telling everyone at this gathering that he was a straight A student and that I was a so-called failure. Verbatim, he made digs about me being an idiot routinely for years, and at one point it genuinely affected my self-esteem. Anyway, our families grew apart, I got older and stopped seeing him for several years. Last week though, I went to his sister's wedding and our families were talking. His mother mentioned that he applied for clerkships at the top-tier law firms in our city. We are both law students, by the way, and he was rejected by them all. Everyone else then tried to console him. He was visibly irritated by this and commented things like, "Oh, it's really competitive, hardly anyone gets in these days." I did not say anything, but then his mother asked me if I was working and I said yes, and then she asked where. At first I contemplated saying something like, "Oh, just a place in the city." But then I decided it was too good an opportunity to pass up, so instead I chose to look him straight in the face and name one of the firms he was rejected from. Everyone went silent for a minute, and I cannot explain how satisfying it was to see the astonished look on his face. Just to clarify though, I don't think grades or a fancy job are a measure of intelligence or a person's worth at all, but he definitely does, and it was just a really petty win for me because the guy was a total jackass. And the last one was posted by user Traxxas on our own subreddit r/ripe stories, and it is titled Crazy Karen Short Story. During my time I was working in grocery retail as a bagger. This job entailed me as the janitor getting carts and walking the store and of course bagging the groceries. During my time there was this one girl that I will call Karen. You see, during the height of December here where I live in the southern states of the USA, I had to go out and get carts in blistering cold air and wind. I would come inside and try to get warm only to get yelled at to go back out to get more and more carts. It came to a head when I argued with her, and well, it caused her to give me two choices. Either get carts or quit. I quit and they had to deal with Christmas rush on the day of Christmas. They wanted me to come back and I told them to either fire her or I won't come back. I feel sorry for the few friends I made, but I don't feel a lick of empathy for the woman that nearly gave me hypothermia from the cold outside that day. Note, I was wearing winter clothing and it did not help. It was that cold. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.